welcome to LaFlamme Throwers Sports Podcasting, football, and more. I'm joined today by Michael LaFlamme, a.k.a. The Frog, and Steve True North. And we have a special guest on today, Jesse Ghiorzi, who is going to be bringing us information on the Miami Dolphins football and Miami Dolphins draft. I'm going to turn it over to Frog because Frog introduced us to Jesse, and I'll have Frog do a more formal introduction.
Yeah, so I've known Jesse for some time through his spouse, and who is from our hometown, Steve and I's hometown. And then every time I talk to him, it's like I knew he was a Dolphins fan, and I kidded because Jesse can share where he's from, but I was like, well, you're just early for if you become an eventual snowbird. You already got your team already chosen, and you chose it at a young age. And the more we would have conversations about football, I was like, man, this guy could easily do what I was doing at the time when I met him. I was a scout for the Bears, and I was just blown away. And then now that we're on this forum, Jesse was like the first person I thought to give a very good fan's perspective, but also like more detailed and informed than most people. So I was excited, and I'm personally very excited about his squad this year, not just because of relationships I have, but the people that they drafted, and he'll get to share more about that. So everyone, this is Jesse. We're excited to have him aboard.
Hey guys, Jesse Ghiorzi, happy to be here. I'm flattered by Frog's comment there that I could do what you do. I definitely can't. I think as House of Cards, one of the earlier seasons, one of the characters said, don't mistake proximity to power with actual power. So sometimes I make the mistake of having proximity to football guys and making myself think that I am a football guy. I'm a football fan. I definitely don't know the game nearly as well as a guy like Frog or any of the really smart football folks on our staff at USA Football, which is where I work. But been a Fins fan for a long time and happy to be here.
Jesse, you mentioned USA Football. Tell us a little bit about what USA Football does.
Yeah, our mission is to grow, advance, and unify the game. We focus on the youth level, though we are involved with some different high school groups. But in our role as the national governing body of youth football, we really, again, try to grow the game. My focus is on marketing all the programs and things that we do to parents and athletes. So that's stuff like our First Down initiative, which is sort of a no-cost, no-tackle, no-contact way to introduce kids to football, focuses on the basics, games like flag tag, red light, green light, here's how to catch, here's how to throw, really, really basic stuff just to kind of have a first positive experience with the game of football, things like that, as well as different programs that our smart football folks come up with to make the game safer, to make the game help the game be taught in a more progressive way. And we're sort of the youth football marketing department, I guess. And so it's us giving value and giving different assets and things to leagues that run youth football leagues across the country, and helping make parents and athletes excited to play the game, make parents feel more comfortable about all the safety initiatives and things that we're doing to create a better, stronger, and safer game. And also in the high school level, we're not quite as involved in that. We do run the USA Football's national team program that's got high school team programs as well as middle school programs. But in most normal springs, we have thousands and thousands of athletes at 18 to 20 regional events across the country. And our tag for that is really that everyone who comes through one of our programs gets better, and the best get a shot to represent the United States at the International Bowl and at AT&T Stadium every January against teams from all across the world, which American football is played in a lot more countries than I think most people realize. But this year, we're really excited to have 8 guys that have come through our program get drafted. I'm looking at a list of running these guys down, but Chase Young, Jalen Rager, a couple first-round picks, DeAndre Swift, Jonathan Taylor, Laviska Shenault Jr., Trayvon Diggs, Matt Hennessy, and Eno Benjamin were 8 guys of the 11 that we had draft eligible this year, and then 3 of those other guys went on to sign UDFA contracts with teams. So we're pumped about that.
Jesse, where is USA Football based?
We're based in Indianapolis. We've got some staff in different parts of the country, not chiefly, but I'm among those. I'm in Columbus, Ohio. As Frog mentioned, my wife is a sports psychologist. She was at Indiana University, so I was at at Indy at our headquarters for the first about year that I was there. And then for the last few months, since my wife moved over to Ohio State, we've been in Central Ohio.
You know, Jesse, being in Indianapolis, you missed a rare opportunity to become an Indianapolis Colts fan. So we're here to talk to you about the Miami Dolphins. How did you escape becoming a Colts, a Brown, a Bengals fan, and end up a Dolphins fan?
Yeah, I've spent a lot of my time around the country. I grew up in New York, so everything else, Yankees, Knicks, unfortunately, New York Rangers. My favorite soccer team's got some scarves over there behind me, which they play in London in the English Premier League. But, you know, I don't know. I had this book. I don't remember the name of it, but these were popular in the late 80s, early 90s. It was just sort of like kind of like a magazine, kind of like a short book. They just had like, hey, look at all these cool these NFL star players. And it was like made for kids around my age. And so I think I was about 8. And Dan Marino was in there. And, you know, I've started to think about this a little bit more after being married to my sports psychologist wife, that my dad wasn't around as much as I was a kid. My parents got divorced when I was 2. So maybe not only did I see an awesome quarterback, awesome colors in the 80s and 90s, but also maybe saw a little bit of an Italian-American father figure in Dan Marino, you know, to really put myself in the chair there. But yeah, it was Dan Marino. It was 91, 92. And I was like, this is my team. I don't care about the Jets. I don't care about the Giants. Let's roll with the Fins.
So, Jesse, what is your all-time favorite, like, memory? And then we'll have to follow that up also with your worst. So you can start with worst and with best, or start with best and with worst.
Yeah, one of the worst ones, there's 3, I think, that immediately come to mind. One of the worst was that first year. I think it was 91 or 92. The Dolphins, I believe, were 8-7 heading into week 17. The Jets were 7-8. I was watching on my grandmother's TV because I was in New York. It was a local CBS game. And if the Dolphins won, they were kind of a win and in situation. And the same thing for the Jets. And I think the Dolphins, I don't remember all the details, but I remember the game pretty clearly. The Dolphins blew a lead in either the third or the fourth, went to overtime. Jets hit a field goal. I didn't know like fully like what the playoffs were and everything at that age in my first season being a Dolphins fan, but I knew that everybody on TV thought it would be good for us to get in, so I wanted to get in. And then I remember crying a bunch that when the Jets hit that field goal, and then I swallowed a bunch of bubble gum as a coping mechanism of sorts, and then had a stomach ache the next later that evening. So that's a negative memory that comes to mind. A recent positive one, they've not had the success that the Yankees have had, obviously, but so most of my positive sports memories are tied up there, or even a few with the Miami Redhawks. But from a Dolphins perspective, one of the positive ones, I think, you know, the Miracle Miami last year, or 2 years ago rather, when a neighbor of ours in Indy was a big Pats fan, and I had the game on, and he'd come over to watch the second half at our place, and I think we had Red Zone on one channel, and we're flipping back, and so we flipped to the Dolphins game. I'm like, okay, like, cool. They gave it a good run. You know, worst case scenario, like, what? Imagine if something happens here, and then all of a sudden, Kenyon Drake running down the sideline, Dolphins win, and I'm just like flipping out. And I think at the time the Dolphins were, you know, 5-8 or something, so it wasn't a meaningful game at all. But I was just elated, and I was like, look, what, like, this is the worst part of your season. This is the best part of my season. You'll probably go on to win a championship, which they did, beat the Rams. And so it was just kind of a nice moment, but that really like gave you a good bit of context. And like the Dolphins have been such a frustratingly mediocre franchise that the highest point that I can think of in the last several years is that. And another negative one, again, there's another one that comes to mind, but that Dan Marino's final game was 62-7. I had gotten a Sports Illustrated whatever subscription that came with a Dolphins watch, and I was working at a deli in New York during the game, and I couldn't switch my time. I was the only person who could run the register that day, and so I was missing the game. It was a wild card game, or no, it was a divisional round game against the Jaguars, and people would be coming in and just like they see my watch, I'd check them out and be like, ooh, it's 21-0 in the first quarter. Ooh, it's 35-0. Ooh, it's I was like, great. Well, at least I'm missing this game. It's Dan Marino's last game, but at least I didn't just have to watch that beating unfold. I just remember like people seeing this watch and just be like, "Hey, sorry, bud. Can I have those chips and a pack of smokes?"
I love it, Jesse. So listen, we've got to assume Dan Marino is your favorite all-time player. Correct me if I'm wrong. But who was your favorite of his wide receivers to throw to?
Yeah, I mean, I think I liked Irving Fryer a lot. There was a lot of those guys like, Clayton and Duper, the Marks brothers were really, really good. But then there was a lot of those guys that nobody was like, never was at that level, but always had like some interesting guys that he would throw to, Orlando Gadsden and O.J. McDuffie and sort of the tail end of the Marino era and into the Jay Fiedler and Damon Heward or Brock Heward, one of the Heward eras. If we can call those eras, but like those kind of like random, there'd always be like some guy that was pretty good, then that gave way to Chris Chambers and those kind of things. But I think one of the more memorable guys was a running back just because his name, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who then later I think was sued by the more well-known Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and he had to like tweak the spelling of his name to have like 1B or something different because it was like he was sick of people being like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, the running back. So a lot of really, really interesting guys. I think, Orlando Gadsden and O.J. McDuffie, I think were two of those receivers that stuck out to me sort of at that tail end of the Marino era, if I'm getting my times right.
So, Jesse, what was your favorite draft memory since we talk a lot of draft on here?
I mean, there's two that come to mind. One was the one that just happened a couple days ago. And I can show you guys, we were doing a Zoom with some old colleagues of mine, and I can show you the clip I put together of my reaction on that one. That's actually how I got this hat. The Flores and Greer did such good smoke screens. A Colts fan was running his mouth to me, a former colleague of mine, and was like, so we made a bet that I'd buy him a Colts hat if the Dolphins didn't pick Tua at 5. And he has to buy me a Dolphins hat if they picked 2 at 5. So obviously I'm wearing this hat and I'm thrilled. But that was an absolutely a late moment of elation. I think the one definitely not a good memory, but that really stuck out was 2005. The Dolphins had the 3rd pick. And it was just a really big swing of emotion because they had drafted Ronnie Brown with the 2nd or 3rd pick that year out of Auburn. And then within maybe 10 minutes, it felt like it was about 30 seconds when I'm thinking back in my memory, I got a call from my aunt and letting me know that my grandma had unexpectedly passed away. So it was like, just, wow, I'm excited. We got a running back. This guy's going to be awesome. And then like, hey, your grandma just died out of nowhere. And so like at the draft every year, I always think about that. And I was close with my grandma. And like I talked about, the first Dolphins memory I had was at my grandma's house. And so that was just sort of definitely not a good memory, but one that is always explicitly linked to the draft every single year since 2005 for me.
Jesse, I have a question about the draft, and congrats on Tua, because I do think he's going to be a fantastic NFL quarterback. From everything you read after the draft, Miami was trying to pull off a trade with Detroit and then bundle the 3 and 5 picks to try to get Cincinnati's number 1 spot to go with Burrow. Obviously, the Bengals weren't interested. I think they're both going to be great quarterbacks. My question to you is, are you glad you ended up with Tua regardless? If you had to pick of both quarterbacks, would you have gone with Burrow or would you have picked Tua?
I think I feel good about it. Like if they had gotten to 1, I think the answer is obviously Burrow. But the plan before the season was tank for Tua. And they looked statistically by a bunch of measures. The Dolphins were one of the worst teams in the history of the NFL through the first 4 or 6 weeks. I think I looked up they were on pace, I think through the first 4 or 5 weeks to break both the record for fewest points scored in a year and most points given up in a year. So it was sure those are basic stats. It's not a Football Outsider or a Pro Football Focus thing, but they were awful by any measure. And then all of a sudden, they were trading, good players and Tunsil and Stills and Minka and it was like, okay, they're going to even be worse. And then whatever, this team just gritted through, and I think they ended the season 5-6 after starting out 0-5 or somewhere around 500. And that was really inspiring. And it was with this team that was lacking a lot of NFL quality talent throughout the depth chart was starting to win games. And so the plan at the beginning of the season was tank for Tua. The tank was going great until about week 8, week 9. They showed some competitiveness and won a few games. And so it was sort of like the plan was to tank for Tua, and we didn't have to tank, and we still got Tua. So, that wouldn't have happened if he didn't hurt his hip there, I think, against an Ole Miss game. But that was the plan beforehand. The path that got there was a little bit different, but I'm thrilled with the outcome still.
So I'm excited for you. With you being our Dolphins insider and you follow the team, what do you think the needs were coming into the draft, other than quarterback, obviously? But what do you think the needs were? And then how did you feel about how they did? What do you think the needs were? And then the second part that I want to add to it is, did you want them to take anyone else? Because they had a lot of first-round collateral.
Yeah, I think obviously I wanted quarterback, not quarterback. I wanted Tua specifically at 5.
Yeah.
I wanted O-line and edge at 18 and 26, which are the original picks they had. Whatever order those came in, I was fine with that, depending on what the value was there, right? So they went O-line at 18 with Austin Jackson, I think the youngest guy in the draft at 20, a bit of a raw prospect, which I don't hate, because it's not like this team needs a guy to be stepping in to an elite level, on the line right now. Like, this team is still a few years away from competing for a championship or competing even for something notable like that. So I was thrilled with the first 2 picks. I think that, when you saw a guy, I forget, one of those top 4 guys, maybe not Becton, but I thought maybe it was Becton that was dropping a little bit further than they thought. I thought it would have been neat to see packaging a couple pieces to try and go up and get one of those guys. I was a little bit surprised after they made the trade, I think, with the Niners, when they went and got I don't want to butcher his name because I don't love it when people do mine, but Noah Iggy from Auburn, because it was like, this is already a strength. Xavier Howard's very, very good. We got Byron Jones from Dallas, who's also very good. So it's like, why did we get another cornerback there? Again, like, I have proximity to football guys, but I'm not one myself. So I kind of trust the group in Miami there. And then I kind of got sold on that idea of just creating deepening that strength and recognizing the Dolphins run a lot of nick lunges, so it would be good to have another cornerback there. So needs beforehand, I think at those were the 3, I think, edge, O-line, and quarterback. And obviously O-line is not going to be solved by picking one, because we traded our best O-lineman in Tunsil last year for picks. So that was a need. I think running back was also a need. I love the Jordan Howard move. So that was exciting, but and as I mentioned before, some of those USA football guys, I was hoping that we were to get Jonathan Taylor or DeAndre Swift. Would have been really excited to see one of those guys that have represented the company I work for to go play for the Fins. But then once Dobbins got surprise picked at 56 or 57 there by Baltimore, I was like, okay, this next pick, Baltimore's not going to pick a running back. They're good. I was really, really wanting Dobbins then. So I was not loving the lack of running back talent, but I also really dig Breida. So when I saw that get through, actually, I was not watching the draft actively at that point, but a Niners fan of mine texted me. I was like, I like him. I hope he stays healthy for you. And I was like, did we just get Breida? So I think the 1-2 punch of him and Howard will feel real good. Still not a ton, in terms of like edge rushers there. They added a few guys in free agency that might be able to help that, either from a hand on the ground position on the edge or from an outside linebacker position. So we'll see how that works. But I think the biggest needs we're definitely looking at O-line, really trenches generally. But I'm looking at the draft now. They got 2-3, a tackle and Austin Jackson, and 2 guards. And I think one of the guards, Solomon Kinley, I think that was the guy I was thinking of. Or no, it was Robert Hunt, the second-round pick out of Louisiana Lafayette. I think he had played like over 100 snaps at 3 different positions on the line. So a guy like that's diverse. And I think the things that I read a lot were, regardless of position, they wanted guys that are tough, the guys that are smart, and guys that can do some different things. And I think that, looking at through that lens, if that's what Flores and Grier wanted to do, that all the guys that were drafted seem to fit that bill.
Jesse, I'll tell you one reason that I'm buying stock in your team next year, and you referenced it, is Brian Flores. You don't often see teams that are struggling like Miami was last year that keep playing for their coach and for their team the way that the Dolphins did. And I think the second half of the season and then some that they had speaks volumes to Flores. And I'll tell you, I can identify as a Bengals fan, we didn't obviously do too hot last year either. It's the same reason I'm buying stock in Zach Taylor. And you may recall this, but I will tell you one of the most interesting games I've watched in the past decade between two teams that were out of it. And the joke was that it was the battle for the first pick of the draft was when Miami and Cincinnati played last year. And it was a hell of a football game. Miami won 38-35 in overtime. Neither one of those teams were playing to lose. No. And I can tell you from the outside looking in, you got to feel really good about Brian Flores and the way that his guys play for him. So take that as a compliment and also as an interested shareholder that would buy stock in your team for next year, especially now that you're in a division without Tom Brady. And at some point, I would love to hear how you feel about the Patriots, maybe the Giant having been slayed in the AFC East, and what you think that division is going to look like moving forward without Brady.
Yeah, I think it's for the first time in 20 years, the Dolphins have a shot at having the best quarterback in the division. The only time I think that the Patriots haven't won the division in the Brady era was the year that he got hurt in the first game of the season against the Chiefs. And Matt Castle came in and they still won 11-5, and the Dolphins won 11-5 under Sperano and Pennington. I think Pennington won comeback player of the year that year. And so that was an exciting team, but then they ended up, I think they lost to the Colts maybe in the first round, but or the Ravens, but that was an exciting year. And that was, there's been no doubt who the best quarterback in the AFC East, who's the best quarterback of all time, always there. And so, I'd say right now that crown goes to Josh Allen. But it's not a crown with quite as strong of a grip on it as Brady did. So it could be Tua. It could be if Fitzpatrick's playing through most of the year. I wouldn't totally write off Josh Rosen yet because they did just trade a third rounder for him last year. I'd be very upset if Tua and Fitzpatrick, if Josh Rosen's not third in the depth chart or moved. I think that'd be a bad omen for the Finns. But I think that I'm really, really just talking myself into the excitement of that there's so many examples recently of whether you're starting from Jump Street or coming in after a few weeks. But you look at how great Baker was his rookie year. You look at how great Watson got his rookie year. And a few other guys they're escaping my mind. Obviously, Lamar made that leap in year 2, but there's a bunch of really good examples of guys going straight from college and excelling. And so, the idea that could be Tua, and it could be the guy, who could be the best guy in the division, is really, really exciting.
Jesse, I'll tell you, Frog is compared to Steve Young. So if that tells you anything, he's very bullish on Tua. If Allen is wearing the crown in the AFC East, it's definitely a very inaccurately fitting crown. Maybe a very strong arm crown, but once again, not a very accurate. The guy I love in your draft, though, is Curtis Weaver. You guys got Curtis Weaver in the 5th round. There were some projections of him going, 2nd round a few months ago. And then when he didn't have the combine, everybody expected he dropped. He could be a real talent. And then talk to us a little bit about Devontae Parker. Is he for real? Is the Devontae Parker we saw last year more of a contract year Devontae Parker or the real Devontae Parker?
He's also been a guy, and the Dolphins have made it easy for me the last several years to avoid having a Dolphin in fantasy football. And so, but I've had Devontae Parker on and off on teams over I think his entire career. And so he's been doubly frustrating to me when you see and you drop him after he doesn't do anything for you and he's upsetting you as your real team too. And then all of a sudden he goes off and has some really, really impressive times. So I think he's also been in a weird situation his whole career with different coaches and coordinators. And this year, though, we're going to have a different coordinator again, and Chan Gailey coming back out of retirement, which is a curious move. But again, trusting this group, not looking at the Dolphins over the last 10 years as the same as the Greer and Flores Dolphins. But I think, he's been in a bit, and I don't know all the wide receiver coach history, but the system and all that stuff have been different. And so it's not like Devontae Parker's had a terrific quarterback throwing to him and consistently. And I do like Ryan Tannehill a lot. But I don't know if Ryan Tannehill had that same kind of personality that Marino, Tua, those kinds of guys have to demand the best out of their receivers. I don't know if Tannehill had that same kind of makeup. Obviously, he was I would say slightly above average quarterback for most of his time, and had some games where he was really, really good, and had some times where he won the game. But so I don't know. I don't think it's he's been in the league for, I guess, 4 years, I think, Parker now. So it feels like a little bit strange to say it's too early to judge him, but it does feel like he hasn't gotten quite a fair shake yet. So I think that he can do some things. I think that the lack of getting I don't think the Dolphins, they didn't draft any wide receivers except Malcolm Perry, who they're going to try and turn into a receiver or Taysom Hill type kind of player. But I don't remember any notable receivers that they added in free agency either. So I think that they trust the guys that they have right now, which mostly is Parker and Preston Williams. And so I think that we'll see what happens. But I think that this could be. Again, it's going to be difficult unless Tua is starting from Jump Street, or unless Fitzpatrick is like he is starting this whole entire year. I think it could be another weird, difficult kind of year to really give to judge Parker. I'm a big fan of George Kittle. 2 years ago, he was able to do terrific things down the field with three different quarterbacks, and Nick Mullins, Jimmy G, and I forgot the other Iowa quarterback that they had there briefly.
Brethard? Was it Brethard? CJ Brethard?
Yes. And so you can't expect a receiver or tight end to always have like that same connection and be able to be productive no matter the quarterback, no matter what's going on. And so, though they play different positions, I think that's been a little bit the case with Devontae Parker. So he can definitely elevate. He can definitely make some real physical plays, and you've seen those flashes. I hope that he puts it together, but I guess if he doesn't, it might be time to cut bait if he's entering into the next phase of his career.
Well, Jesse, I'll share with you, and I'm looking forward to us doing another podcast about the Dolphins. Just when we get to the future, I'm excited for your offensive coordinator. I was at Buffalo and he's a head coach, and he's always found a way to maximize his talent. And this is exciting for Dolphins fans. I can't speak as far as fantasy, but I can speak as far as putting players and utilizing their talents for their best fit. So it's going to be exciting to see the possible jumps of all those skill players that have question marks to the fan that can't follow them like you. And then possibly as the year moves on, whether it's Fitzpatrick, because he got another year of timing with those players, and then with a coordinator that he knows very well that has put him in positions to succeed, or whether it's Tua taking that jump. I really feel very confident. You'll leave the year and you won't go, man, our offensive skill players were awful. You might leave it like, well, what would it be if we got them a little bit more talent? So I'm excited for you, and we'll get to nerd out more about that here in the summer months.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I think this is absolutely going to be one of the more exciting years, if not the most exciting year. It's absolutely been the season that I'm obviously super hoping that happens, but that I've been the most excited about. The Dolphins haven't had a lot of reason for optimism in the last several years, and even the year that things looked like they were heading in the right direction, then when Tannehill got knocked out of the season, I think in like week 14, and then Matt Moore took over and played well. But then we just got absolutely boat raced at the Steelers in the wild card round. So, that year I didn't have that big of hopes. And so this is the first round pick that the Dolphins have made on a quarterback, obviously since Ryan Tannehill. And I think the highest they've ever picked a quarterback in the first round since Bob Greasy forever ago. So it's just, before my time. So there's not been, and even when Tannehill was there. He was, I think, had only played 1 or 2 years after transitioning from wide receiver to quarterback at A&M. So I was excited about Tannehill, and I was getting reminded on this day on Facebook where I was like, yeah, I'm excited about this guy when we drafted him, but nobody's got the polish and potential and upside of Tua. So like this season is all gas, no brakes. I'm really, really excited about it.
So Jesse, go ahead, Frog.
Oh, I was just going to say this will be an odd year because I will be rooting for the Finns. And then maybe I'll change tone if we have the Buffalo Bills expert pop on. But regardless, so I'm big Tua fanboy, as a fan, and I look forward to seeing them grow. So wanted to let you know you have like a fellow fan right now. And I sincerely mean that part.
So Jesse, in closing, last question. If you had to predict, what do you think the record is going to look like at the end of the 2020 season?
Yeah, so I don't know. We don't obviously have the schedule yet. I saw the NFL may release it in early May. But let me just look through these real quick, and I'll give you my quick take. So home opponents, Bills, I think, can be a win. Pats, and this is like the Dolphins have played Brady as well as anybody in the division. Not good, but they don't just get the train running them every single time they play them. So I'll say home Pats is a win. I'm going to say we're going to sweep the division at home. That's Jets win. The Chiefs will blow the barn doors off in Miami. That's a loss. Chargers, especially if it's a 1 o'clock game, that's always difficult for teams to go West Coast to East Coast. So that will be 4 wins. I think the Rams come to Miami and win. I think the Seahawks come to Miami and win. Wow, it would be a tasty game if Burrow and Tua are starting as expected, whatever time of year that is. So I think they can beat the Bengals in Miami.
Oof.
So 5-3 at home. So then away, I think they lose to the Cardinals. I think they lose to the Bills. I think they lose to the Broncos. I think they beat the Jaguars. I think they lose to the Patriots. I think they beat the Jets. I think they beat the Raiders. And I think they lose to the Niners in San Francisco. So what's that, 8?
8-8. Yeah, that's
sort of what I expect this year. I think after 5-11 last year, and especially as they finish things up, still a lot of stuff to figure out. What time are these games and when of the season they are and that sort of a thing. But right now, I think anywhere between 7-9 and 9-7. I think Big Cat says this a lot on Pardon My Take, but I just want the Dolphins to be in the hunt this year. I want they show the playoff graphic when it says in the hunt. I want the Dolphins logo to be up there. I want them to say something exciting about Tua and the offense and how this defense has found ways to create ways to pressure the quarterback and how you can't pass in Miami with that secondary. So as long as we're in the hunt this year, I'll feel good about it. So for me, that's seven wins and up.
Jesse, I would like to propose on the record now a friendly but maybe significant wager on that Burrow versus Tua matchup. I think you already have your next date on the podcast set, my man.
I'm in on that. I've already made a bet, even though we have no idea what's going to happen this NFL season with a good friend of mine who's a Bengals fan, $10 a win to see whoever gets more wins, Dolphins versus Bengals. Because I think, again, he had the same expectations as me, 7 to 9 wins. We'll see what happens.
I just want to say this is kind of some sad Kendrick Spirit items because, just do the Northeast Ohio thing. I'm not really that much of a Browns fan like your spouse, but it's like in the hunt. We're looking for in the hunt. Yes, that sounds like so much. That's probably all that that Chelsea talked about. That's what Steve's looking forward to and yourself. So we want in the hunt.
I never said the Bengals were only going to be in the hunt. You haven't asked me that question, Frog. That'll be saved for a later show.
Well, and I'll tell you, nothing makes me feel more secure as a Colts fan than being around Dolphins, Browns, and Bengals fans. It's a good place to be, actually. So listen, Jesse, I want to say thank you from Steve and Frog and myself for coming on the webcast here. We would love to have you back as the season comes closer. Best things for your Dolphins, and we're all really rooting for Tua. Appreciate it, and signing off, stay safe.